Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Kane County Finance and Budget Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Could we have roll call for attendance, please?
Ford, Leonard,
Leonard here.
Martin,
Martin present.
Sanchez,
Here.
Surges.
Surges
Tepe?
here, sorry.
Thank you. Tepe,
Here.
Shepro,
Shepro here.
Berman.
Here.
Thank you.
Is opportunity to read the minutes. Are there any, I need a,
Leonard so moves.
Leonard moved a second. We have a second. Tepe, second. Any changes or modifications to the minutes? Could we have roll call, please?
Ford, Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there anyone online that wants to speak? All right. We have Mr. Roberts has asked to speak. Would you like to speak at this time, sir? And please state your name and address for the record.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barry Roberts. I'm at 671 McClure Avenue in Elgin. I am a member of the Lee Barrett Memorial AMVET Post in Elgin. And as such, I am their delegate and I am on the executive board of the Veterans Assistance Commission at Kane County. On March 9th, I spoke to the Kane County Board through public comment about the need to give our supervisor, Jake Zimmerman, and his 3 service officers a cost of living increase. After the meeting, I learned that as non-union employees, they do receive the same cost of living increase as union employees. And so I have an additional message to send out here. So at our quarterly VAC meeting, which was a week ago Monday, and while Jake Zimmerman, the supervisor, was in the room, excused from the meeting, I gave the commission my report on that. It was decided by the members of the commission, the delegates, that I should go before the Finance and Budget Committee here and to request a bonus or a salary increase for their for 4 public servants. That'd be Jake Zimmerman and his 3 service officers. Let me now outline why we veterans on the commission are in unison agreement about this. First, you need to know that when the delegates talk privately with Supervisor Zimmerman about this, he always says that if his service officers do not also get any kind of a raise, then he will reject any increase he may be given. That, in my view, shows good leadership. This being said, let's talk about the facts as we see them. Last fiscal year, from property taxes, the VAC received $305,400 as a budget for operating their office, of which $194,547 went to salaries and wages. I should note that the VAC has, to my knowledge, since Jake has been there, always been under budget. Now, the principal mission of the VAC is benefit application filing and claims management. Here is something remarkable and impressive in my view. Last year, the VAC obtained just under $4 million in new benefits for veterans of Kane County. That means for every Kane County tax dollar allocated to the VAC by the board, the return is $13.17. And that is money that is spent in Kane County. For example, while I was in the Army, I was exposed to Agent Orange. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with heart disease. I went to Jake, and he filed my claim for a service-connected disability. I was given a disability rating and now get a monthly check for the rest of my life, and that I spend here in Kane County, where I've lived for more than 50 years. And will continue until I leave this world. Every year, the veterans of the commission are charged with putting together the superintendent's annual evaluation and performance review. If you've ever been in the military, you probably know that that we can criticize and complain better than the best. But listen to what our delegates say about Jake's performance as superintendent. And I have the evaluation right here that we put together once a year. So let me read just a couple of things off his current evaluation. It's kind of small print, so I gotta strain my eyes to read it here. But 2020 was an especially challenging year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. With Jake's leadership, the VAC of Kane County adjusted quickly and found ways to maintain nearly full operations. Some of the things that they have accomplished. The VAC has increased the percentage of county veterans using VA health care over the prior year. And this has been, I don't know what that was. Okay, I'll read that again. The VAC increased the percentage of county veterans using VA health care over the prior year. Second, the VAC increased VA pensions and their VA comp dollars paid to the county veterans over the prior year. During this year of very unique and challenging circumstances, not much more could be expected of the service officers of the VAC of Kane County. That's in his evaluation, which I believe you have access to as the board. Okay. Ever since Jake Zimmerman has been our supervisor, we have been extremely pleased. Over the first few years, we rated him at almost perfect in his evaluation. And in the past couple of years, we veterans on the commission think, in a manner of speaking, that he is at the top of his game. Having said that, let's get to back to some of this, the subject of salary. Jake is making $60,908 per year. By comparison, the VAC superintendent in the surrounding counties makes substantially more. And I have a list here I'm going to pull out. It gives us an example of that. Now, just the neighboring counties here. In Lake County, the superintendent makes $88,291. That's a difference of about $28,000 a year. In Will County, the superintendent makes $86,800, still up there. In DeKalb County, The VAC superintendent makes about $80,000 a year. In McHenry County, the VAC superintendent makes $72,685. Now, Madison County, I don't even know where Madison County is. Their VAC superintendent makes $96,553 a year. So it's obvious. If Jake is making $60,000 a year, he is really underpaid. Also, I have a list of Kane County supervisors. And as I go down the list here, I'm not going to read them, but except for one. And that is, the one that struck me was the administrator for animal control, or as in my day, we called him the dog catcher. That person is making $80,000 a year. Jake is making 60, okay? So let me find my place here again.
Mr. Roberts, I neglected to tell you that you had 3 minutes in your conversation. We've gone beyond that, but can you net it out,
Oh, should I wrap this up then?
please?
Okay. Well, bottom line is that, let me get my place here and I'll just wrap it up real quick. All right. We delegates on the commission who are all members of the Kane County American Legion, of the VFWs, of the AMVETS, of the Vietnam Veterans of America, and of the Marine Corps League are united in that we want to retain Jake Zimmerman and his service officers by providing them with an equitable salary that is more in line with their peers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Surges here.
Burgess?
I know we're under public comment, but I just wanted to thank Barry for coming once again. Barry brought this through the Human Resources Committee. I can't agree more with all of the points that he's making towards Mr. Zimmerman and his team. We concur, but I did explain to him about the 2% contractual cost of living for both non-union and union employees, and that the appropriate step was to bring it to the Finance Committee, where we could begin some deliberations and conversations as we go into the budget year. So, Barry, I just wanted to thank you one more time, and to this committee, thank you for hearing us.
Thank you. And as a veteran myself, I appreciate what's being done by the VAC and appreciate your request. Moving on. Treasurer's report.
Good morning, Carolyn Brady from the Treasurer's Office, Chairman Berman and County Board members. Nice to see you in person, Mr. Berman. The Treasurer's report has been submitted for your review. This week, we made the last payment of the CARES to the small businesses. And that's all I have.
Any questions or comments from?
Is it possible at all to get a copy of the CARES committee has not met recently? And I think that there were, I think that where we were anticipating that we were only going to get to a certain number of small businesses, I believe that we were able to exceed that original number, but we've not seen a final listing of that. Is it possible to get a copy of that spreadsheet updated from anyone?
Cliff, this is Commissioner Sanchez or Board Member Sanchez.
Jared.
I'll follow up with you on that. I'll get you the information
Thanks.
and make sure it's available to everyone.
Appreciate it.
Very good. Any other comments? Finance Director report, Mr. Hanzik.
Good morning, everyone. I have quite a lot of things to just quickly review with you, so I'll go through as quickly as I can. If we were to follow along in my report that I provided to you, the very first thing that I'd like to mention is regarding the property tax levy. Excuse me. If you remember, back in the fall, and this is what we've been doing now for a number of years, When the board authorizes a levy amount, we increase the amount that's authorized by roughly about $700,000 so that we can capture any amount of new property, new construction, and the TIF coming back into the taxable property. So we never know what the exact amount is until the tax extension office and the county clerk's office works through all those figures, and it's usually in about February, March timeframe when we get the final figures. So the final amount that was attributable to new property is $525,078 compared to the $700,000 that was originally estimated. So we need to reduce the tax levy by $174,922 in order for it to be exactly the amount of tax levy that would capture the new construction and retiring TIF zone, and no more than that. And so that, and I was authorized by that original resolution to do just that. And so this is included in the report to inform you of the amount that the tax levy is being adjusted to. Likewise, we budgeted about $490,000 of new construction based on what we could estimate at the time. We try to be a little bit conservative there. And so we'll end up with about $35,000 more in tax revenue than we had budgeted. The next section refers to the 2021 budget versus actual reports. I usually include those couple of paragraphs that explain the general reasons for some of the initial variances at the beginning of the year, both for revenues and expenses. And then I move on in the second page to talk about some of the specific expense variances that I'm required to comment on. There's really nothing of any concern here. Most of these variances have to do with special revenue funds, which normally have cash on hand to cover it, or it may be grant funded expenses such as in the county health department, where they're over their annual budget significantly, but there is significant grant revenue coming in to cover those expenses. Just to give you a quick update on fiscal year end. So most of our processes within the finance department have been complete as far as our year-end review and reconciliations. The external auditors, their field work is still underway, but it's just about wrapping up for the final audit field work, and then the attention turns towards preparing the financial statements and the footnotes that go along with it, and all the analysis that goes into preparing the annual comprehensive financial report. Because we're now just about to the point where we could say that our figures are final for 2020, we've also included an updated draft budget report for fiscal year 20 within your packet. As a result of the final reviews and reconciliations, we did find a few more expenses related to building management that we needed to post to 2020. And there was less revenue, or investment revenue allocated to the general fund than we had anticipated. And so as a result of those additional expenses and less revenue to the general fund, we needed to reduce the amount that was allocated to the property tax freeze protection fund by $215,000. So that has been done. I was pre-authorized to make that adjustment in order to make sure that we are on track with closing the year with the audit. But what we need to also then do is provide a budget adjustment for that $215,000 reduction of the allocation to the property tax freeze protection fund, and then also a budget adjustment to cover those additional expenses for building management. So there's a resolution in the agenda packet to cover that. So when all is said and done, there's roughly $2,894 that'll be left in the general fund that will be just absorbed into the fund balance. Then moving on to the next page of my report, page 3, it's just now, this is just a recap by department within the general fund, first of all, of the revenues, so you can see where we fell short by department on the revenue side, and that's totals 3.5 million, which is what we have been, I think, forecasting and stating in our previous finance report, so it's very close to what we expected. And then you have the expenses, and you can see that we came out far, I guess, below $4.8 million, what we had originally budgeted in expenses for the year. And you can, by seeing the amounts by department, you can see where those savings were. Then moving on to the next page, this is a recap then. So we have a total of $19,707,000 where we came out ahead for the year, but 18 million of that had to do with the payroll reimbursement from the CARES Act. And then what I've done below that section is just a kind of a recap of what we then did with that $19 million. So, and this was all approved in the previous month's Finance Committee meeting. So we reserved $593,000 for the sheriff's body camera lease payments that will be made over the next 5 years. We rolled over $43,000 to pay for a sheriff's office vehicle that had been budgeted in 2020, but was not delivered until 2021. We took a portion of the sheriff's savings from his department of $586,000 and set that aside to pay for vehicles. We also took another portion of his savings, $239,000, and set that aside to pay the early retirement payouts. This was part of that incentive for early retirements. There was one payout that was made at the end of 2020, and now there'll be a second payout made in the end of 2021. So this $239,000 is set aside to cover that expense. We then set aside $14,409,000 of CARES Act payroll reimbursement into the special reserve. And we've already now passed several resolutions that have been drawing down that savings for various purposes. We also set aside $125,000 from court services savings that is going to be reserved for the build out that they're planning over the juvenile detention center. There's $25,000 rolled over in savings from the treasurer's budget that had to do with the tax sale that was postponed from 2020 into 2021, and that's to cover some of the legal printing fees. Then we had our $1.5 million transferred to the capital fund, and then the balance of $2,185,000 was transferred to the property tax freeze protection fund that we normally use in the following years to help balance our budget. And that leaves that $2,894 remaining to be absorbed by the general fund budget. So because now there are several items that are been placed on reserve in the special reserve fund, my next page, on page 5 of my report, this is probably small type, so I apologize if it's difficult to read, but I wanted to provide for you now a kind of a recap, a summary of what's sitting in the special reserve. Normally we only have 1 or 2 things, but there's several things now. So I thought this was important to keep track of separately. So when we ended the year 2020, we have $18,600,000 sitting in reserve for COVID-19 payroll reimbursement. We have $125,000 for the build out over the JJC. We have $239,000 reserved for the sheriff's early retirement. We have $25,000 for the treasurer's office legal printing fees, and then that's a total of the 19 million on reserve in the special reserve. Included in the budget for 2021 is that next section. So we used $5.6 million of that $18 million of COVID savings to cover the forecasted shortfall of revenue that was expected to continue on into 2021 as a result of the pandemic. And then we also used $2.3 million to close that remaining gap in our budget between revenues and expenses in order to balance the budget for the year. And that's important to note separately because that gap then really carries forward into our next year that we need to close between revenue and expenditures. We also then planned on using that $238,000 from the sheriff's office to cover the early retirement incentive payout expense. The $25,000 should be spent by the treasurer's office for the legal printing fees. And then we're adding $320,000 this year into the special reserve to help pay for the biannual election costs that will occur next year. So that's the middle portion of that recap. And then the bottom portion of the recap shows you what we have already started drawing down from the savings that were left from the COVID payroll reimbursements. So far we've used $108,000 for the health department generator, $42,000 to make up for the temporary liquor license revenue reduction. There was that additional vehicle that was approved by the CARES Act Allocation Committee for the coroner that came out of the payroll reimbursement savings. Then we also paid for the continuation of the sheriff's deputy at the front of Building A here. And that's just their wages, IMF and FICA costs. We have $95,000 for the vaccination consulting fees. We have additional $864,000 for contract tracing, and then $170,000 has been approved to pay for the site rental for the max vaccination site. So that leaves us with roughly $9 million left of the COVID savings. So I could just pause there in case anyone has any questions before I move on for the next section. Okay. Then moving on, I have a recap then of the shared and direct state tax revenue. So this covers sales tax revenue, local use tax revenue, RTA sales tax revenue, state income tax revenue, and personal property replacement tax revenue. Now, surprisingly, we are doing better than we had budgeted by roughly $1.3 million in total. So we're doing better in all of those areas, including sales tax, which we were behind on in previous months. So it seems to be, the recovery seems to be happening more quickly than we had anticipated in terms of our budget. And also, of course, we're doing better than prior year by $500,000. I then provided you with a chart that goes over the last 12 months, and the red area of the chart, this is on the next page of my report, shows where we were falling behind previous year in our sales tax collection. But you can see then by the time we got to December, we already started to exceed sales tax collections for that month. So that was the first sign that things were starting to recover for the year. The cannabis tax update, thanks to the efforts of Madam Chair and legislation that was drafted by Representative Anna Moeller, along with the Illinois Department of Revenue. I have seen when I last looked that House Bill 2415 passed both houses on March 25th. And once signed by the governor, this would enable us to begin collecting cannabis sales tax sales that will be starting in May 2021 instead of having to wait until July. Then regarding the health insurance fund monitoring, we're looking at a cash balance now of a roughly, well, almost $8 million. We had about a $9 million balance the previous month, but that's just the result of timing. So it's a little bit difficult to look at it at a month at a time because we do have fluctuations in the timing of expenses, especially the timing of when the payroll contributions are made, since our payroll is on a 2-week basis. So in some months we have 3 payrolls worth of collection, and in other months it's only 2 payrolls worth of collection. But as of March 25th, we had almost $8 million in the health insurance fund cash account. Our contingency balance for last year, as we ended the year, remains unchanged from the last time that I reported it. $358,000 and $50,000 was untouched. That had been reserved for adult prisoner room and board. And we're starting this year with $900,000 remaining in contingency, and $50,000 is there for adult prisoner room and board. Capital funds, building management so far has only expended 5%. Information technology has expended 73%, but $787,000 is COVID related, for which we expect to be reimbursed. And then as far as the remainder of the multi-use facility budget, we've expended 35% of it so far this year. State quarterly receivables, we have a balance of $4.8 million with only an average receivable aging of about 4 months, which this is really much better than it normally is when we're looking at state receivables. They've been running as high as 6 to 8 months behind, with probation salaries sometimes as high as 1.5 years behind in those payments. So the fact that we're only 4 months behind in our receivable collection from the state is actually very good. I just wanted to mention GASB 84 implementation. I know that's not something we normally talk about. It's more an accounting issue that we're dealing with, but it is something that we need to address by this committee, and where it affects this committee is we'll need to begin creating some new funds in order to track what used to be tracked in agency funds a little differently now, according to the GASB 84 guidance. We need to actually track revenue and expenses for what used to be in agency funds. And so as a result of that, there are a few resolutions on the agenda that touch on this that I can explain more when we get there. The CARES Act update, there's a total of 86 million of payroll and non-payroll COVID-related expenses for fiscal year 2020 that was reviewed and approved for reimbursement. So now that is built into the figures as we close 2020. In 2021, so far we have $2.3 million of payroll and non-payroll related expenses that were also reviewed and approved for reimbursement. And last I looked, there's approximately $3.5 million of non-payroll expenses that we've incurred that still need to be reviewed and approved for reimbursement. And so I provided a little chart for you on the next page that summarizes what I've just told you. So there seems to be remaining a balance of $643,000 that's yet unspent of CARES Act funds, but not everything has been posted, and we're still incurring expense that could be eligible for reimbursement. Just a reminder that we did receive that $14,782,000 in January for the Emergency Rental Assistance Grant. The board did approve that intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Housing Development Authority to administer the program, and the Office of Community Reinvestment is working with the Illinois Housing Development Authority to work out the details of how the program will be administered. And I believe a budget has been provided in this agenda. part of what's included on the agenda is a resolution to create a new fund, and this is for the new mass vaccination fund. This is unusual in the sense that there are several funding sources involved, so we thought that having one fund in which they would all be deposited would be the best way to account for it. And then also several departments are involved in providing this service and incurring expenses. So within this fund, each of those departments will have a place to charge their expenses. So the swiftness in which this has been set up has been done much more quickly than we've been able to get the accounting set up. So it's just amazing to see what was all accomplished. And it's actually up and running. And here we're still trying to get the accounting pieces caught up with that. The new American Rescue Plan, there's also a fund going to be approved for that. That's on the agenda. And we're expecting in total to receive $103,256,000. It's supposed to be coming to us in two, what they're referring to as tranches. The first half we should be receiving in April. That would be the $5,628,000. And the second half would be no sooner than 1 year later. I did include what we do know as far as the allowable expenses at this point, as far as what's contained in the act itself, but we're waiting for the official guidance from the Treasury Department to kind of flesh out more detail as to what's allowed and not allowed. So as soon as we receive that, we'll be providing you with an update there. I do include in my report a description of the budget process for 2022, but when we get to that on the agenda, I can share that. And then as far as purchasing, I don't know how many of you have become familiar with Mr. John Bloomstrand, but he's just an amazing individual who's been working very hard and has accomplished quite a bit. If you were to look at the bottom of my report, you could see he's got like 21 different projects in process that he's making considerable progress on. And so that's included here as well. So that concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Serge is here.
Yes.
Joe, first, thank you. As always, you make everything look so simple and organized, and I have a tough time even hanging with you. So thank you for all you do. Last night at the Committee of the Whole, Chief Judge had come with a plan to do to put together a new courtroom. Have you had access to that? Have you has that been discussed with you? And do we have any problems with trying to get that into our budget?
No, it hasn't been discussed with you, other than I was aware of the $125,000 that they had requested to set aside. So I made sure to honor that request by including that in what we did set aside. I think probably the plan was posted on the agenda. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I will, and I can, if there's any issues there, I can certainly bring those to your attention. But I am not aware of any problem at this point, but I will review it just to make sure.
Yeah, just advocating so that the left hand and right hand are talking. We'd like that. I'd personally enjoy seeing that one go as smoothly as possible. So
sure.
And again, I bring that up as my wife is a CASA, and this fits into that same grouping. So,
Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To address Mr. Surges' concern about the Juvenile Justice Court, the additional courtroom, that was discussed at Judicial and Public Safety this month. It was explained to us by Chief Judge Hall that it looks like virtually all of the money is in their budget. However, they may fall a little bit short, and they had requested last year $125,000 as a maximum amount they may need. We had approved that last year. And so Chief Judge Hall wanted to open up discussion on that to make sure that was still acceptable, which it seemed to be. So I think at the next judicial and public safety meeting in April, we will have a resolution from the chief judge itemizing exactly how that will be paid for. And the exposure to the general fund for Kane County would not exceed 125,000, and it may be zero.
Very good.
Thanks, Bill.
Mr. Tepe? Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Onsick, you talked about the $103 million in the New American Rescue Plan Fund. Okay, that'll be coming, part of it will be coming later on. I'm assuming that that'll be administered by the CARES Committee, or what are the plans associated with that?
It'll be discussed.
Okay, so that falls in that same category and will be,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Shepro?
Mr. Shepro.
Yeah, a question for Joe and maybe for Mr. Leonard. So does the courtroom then become an adjustment if required to the current fiscal year budget, or is that something for next year?
As far as I understand it, it would be this year, and the $125,000 is already set aside in the special revenue fund for that. I'm sorry, the special reserve fund for that purpose. So there would be a budget adjustment required, but it's simply to move the money that was already set aside into the appropriate fund from which it would be spent out of. So it would just be more of a technicality. The funds have already been reserved.
Thank you.
I have a comment, if I may.
Yes,
Thank you,
Chairman.
Chairman. Regarding the CARE Act Committee, I believe that we should, in my opinion, that should be closed out, and we should form a new committee since this is a new funding source, so that they're not complicated, and we could call it what the ARC committee, whatever we're going to, the acronym to name it, so that each one of our funds are managed separately for auditing or for whatever, for future understanding even from our public.
Okay.
Sturgis, question.
Yes.
In following up on this series of questions for the new funding, when the first CARES Act money was received, there was some confusion as to if that full dollar figure was the county's dollars or if that was an allotment that we were supposed to divide out to municipalities. With this new legislation and funding come available, I guess I have the same question, just as a general understanding. Are the municipalities receiving their own, or is the county receiving monies that we then have to allocate and go through that whole thing again?
The municipalities are getting their own. Those that are not in a city or village would be distributed from the county. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful because I think that just muddied the waters last time. But so if the larger municipalities are getting their own directly from whatever the source is, I mean, I think that's just so much easier and less burdensome for us.
True. Any other comments?
Yes, I have one more.
I'm sorry, Chairman.
This coming May, this will be the first time that we have been receiving money for the cannabis tax. Many other counties have designated that funding for some specific purpose. Has that been discussed yet at the board? And if not, perhaps that should be something that for next month we put on for
Item number
discussion.
6 on today's agenda is
Well,
discussion on that.
I think Madam Chair was speaking about the cannabis tax money, not about the federal relief money.
Okay, I'm
And I
sorry.
think that is an
It is the
excellent
cannabis
idea.
tax.
Yes, that we should put it on the agenda for next month.
Okay.
Some of the other counties are using it for a specific purpose. whether it's judicial, public safety. It usually is targeted for some social purpose, but that can be determined by this board.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Oh, I understand. Okay. Very good. The comments, Mr. Hanzig, you may continue.
I'm sorry, so should I proceed then with?
Yes, with the next.
Okay, so there's a discussion of the FY22 budget process, and for those of you who are new, what I was proposing, but this probably could always change based on what issues we need to deal with. But in the month of March, this is when the deadline is for starting the process, and we usually start that by proposing a budget calendar, which I have included in the agenda. So that's part of it. And then the calendar is kind of our guideline, our guide to taking us through the steps that we need to processing the budget. So of course it needs to be approved by the November board meeting, and then you need to back up from there to determine the date that the budget needs to be placed on public display. So of course by that point you need to have everything in detail all determined and balanced. So I don't know that I pulled up. Oh, here you have my calendar. So the calendar is a separate item that's on the agenda that I would like just to have your consent for. It's not a formal approval of a resolution, but just your consent that this makes sense. So if you were to go to that calendar page, and you could see way at the bottom, that's where our end point is, November 9th. That's when it needs to be approved. November 3rd is the executive committee meeting, which is prior to that county board meeting, and that's normally when we present to the executive committee any of the budget highlights and then the actual tax levies, which will be part of the package that will be approved with the budget. October 25th is when the budget needs to be placed on display. So October 12th would be the time when the county board could approve the final draft of the budget to be placed on display. Just so that everyone is in agreement, or at least the majority, that what's being proposed as a budget is at a point where we can place it on public display. October 6th, leading up to that county board meeting, is when we try to have the final general fund budget presented to the executive committee. And then that September 28th is where we present the proposed final budget. But this is where things could become uncertain because we never really know what issues we're needing to be dealing with and how much time. But leading up to that point, it seems to have worked out fairly well to spread out the budget presentations so that 1/3 of them are done in June, 1/3 of them in July, 1/3 of them in August, with that last month where we're trying to focus on then what are the things we need to do to balance the budget. This year, I think our challenge will be much greater. And so although we'll be looking at individual department expense budgets in June, July, and August, we need to also probably simultaneously need to be thinking about what we should or can do, what we're willing to do on the revenue side as well. So I think both of those things need to be happening here, but I don't have the revenue side showing on this calendar, but that's just something to keep in mind. And so normally then we open up the New World system beginning in May for departments and offices to begin entering their information. And our finance department usually uses the month of April to try to work out some of the little details that are necessary for the departments to enter their budgets. So that's roughly the outline of the process. But I would do like to encourage you to begin thinking now about how we're going to, what our options might be to be considered during the budget time on the revenue side.
I have a question.
Yes, Chairman.
We're going to be getting $103 million to expend in approximately 3 years. And then we have our general operating and revenue that you just talked about, that budget. Are we going to be planning two simultaneous budgets? Because that, spending $103 million effectively, and anybody can spend money, but to spend it well and make sure that it's spent substantively rather than wastefully, which to me is critically important. It's a big responsibility for the next committee and for the board to spend that money well. But we can't use that money to underwrite the general operating expenses for the general fund and any revenue that'll be coming in. So there's going to be two separate, in my mind, two separate budget discussions to spend $33 million a year for project infrastructure support, whatever the board decides where it's to be allocated, versus paying for example, requested pay raises from the VA. So it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for raising that distinction. That is exactly how I would envision it, so I do appreciate that. Or what I'm referring to here in this budget process is really just our general operating budget, and there shouldn't be a separate process regarding the American Rescue Plan dollars, and by that committee over, and then eventually the board approving a separate budget for that fund and those dollars. And they obviously probably would intersect at various points, but they should be handled separately.
Very good.
So just to continue on that thought as we're planning, because the money's coming. I mean, what did you mention? It's going to be coming in April, and we'll be getting direction from the Treasury soon after that or simultaneously. Should this Finance Committee perhaps meet separately to be able to at least determine how that the American Relief Act money will be coming, to determine that, and then let the committee decide and manage the expenses if it's going to be allocated to communities? Since we don't have direction, I'm not quite sure what our charge is, but it seems we've got enough to do just with managing the general fund resources on one meeting. To do it both, we'd be here for all day. And just,
Mr. Chairman, may I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
It seems to me, as what Director Onzik and Madam Chair have already pointed out, and the fact that we have, I think, a record number of new board members. And one of the first things I learned was that everything I thought I knew about finance didn't seem to apply to counties. I'm wondering if a significant workshop, committee of the whole, call it what you will, that would involve everybody. Because as you know, sometimes committees do their work and then there are the 1,000 questions that follow from other people, that early in the process, while the departments are doing their work, I think some education of the board members, because especially there's so many new things, including the new federal money that's never been part of the process before. I think it would be helpful to everybody to organize something like that, and sooner rather than later.
I think we have a discussion item 6 on our agenda, which is going to include just what you say, Commissioner. So if we can move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so following the agenda then, we have the item under 5B, 2 and 3. If I could just have the committee's consensus that the budget calendar, the preliminary budget calendar, is appropriate and agreeable to you, as well as part of the process, what I'd like to do is send a request out to all of the departments and offices and ask that they update their 5-year revenue forecast, because they know their revenues and are most familiar with their revenues better than I would. And so we normally send out a request, ask them to update it and to turn it back into the finance department. There's been in the past some elected officials who were hesitant to do that without knowing that that request was authorized by the Finance Committee. So that's why I would just ask you for your consent that I make that request of,
We need a motion and a second then for
Just a consensus vote.
Yeah.
Just a consensus.
a consensus.
Yes.
You don't want to vote on that, just.
Is there anyone that would feel that we should not do this? And I would say the consensus is in favor of it.
thank you. And
Item 3,
and this would also then be for the budget calendar, as I,
is that a consensus again?
Yes.
Is there anyone that is not in favor of the preliminary budget calendar? Then I see it as we all agree. Very good. Thank you, Joe.
thank you.
All right. Now, item number 6, Mr. Leonard is looking for discussion on our federal relief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. I appreciate you putting this on the agenda for discussion. And as Madam Chair had mentioned, and Board Member Shepro and a few other people, with the amount of money that we have coming in here and having much more flexibility than we had with our original money we got last year, I think it's very important that we take a look at where our budget is and how we can best allocate this money in order to balance our budget and be responsible to our employees and also to the residents of Kane County. It's very interesting. About 2 months ago, we had a report from the State's Attorney's Office where State's Attorney Mosser had requested $3.4 million for additional positions needed and to get their pay scale up to a competitive level. She reviewed that and realized that because our budget is so tight, that she really decided to define what needs she had versus what wants she wanted. And she came back this last month and asked for about $1 million, a little over $1 million. In essence, she reduced it by $2.3 million. Then our public defender also came in and said she needed additional people. She came back with the request for one additional attorney at a salary of about $50,000 plus benefits. The point I'm trying to make here is I think everybody in this county is very cognizant of the fact that we have to watch our finances and we can't spend money on wants, but rather needs. And I think everybody's willing to work on that. The other consideration we have too are labor negotiations. And this year, a number of different contracts are coming up for renewal, and there will be an increase there. My estimation is when everything is all said and done, and answering really the needs of the state's attorney with respect to abuse and neglect, domestic violence unit, and a child advocacy program, we're probably looking throughout the county at about a $2 to $3 million increase in payroll alone for this next year. With annual compounding over the next 10 years, this will reach about $7 million annually over the next 10 years. The good, bad news is revenues, some are going to go down like the riverboat gambling. Some are going to stay about the same, hopefully property taxes on existing property tax holders. And some will increase, sales tax, possibly state income tax. Those revenue increases will be eaten up in normal increases we have in expenses outside of payroll. So what we have to do is, like I said before, take care of our employees, balance our budget, and if possible, maintain this property tax freeze. We have a fiscal responsibility to our Kane County residents. And I think what we need to do is realize that this $103 million is a one-time thing. It's a windfall. It's a gift, manna from heaven, whatever term you want to use. My concern is that we don't go out and spend that money, as Madam Chair said, irrationally or quickly. and that we budget it in such a way that we can help balance our budget without increasing taxes to our residents and still taking care of our employees. You know, it's interesting, I was looking at different things, and I know the relief money we got last year, we had a time frame. We had to get that money spent and allocated by a certain period of time. Under this one, in briefly reviewing it, I think we're going to have much more flexibility on how we use that money to help balance our budget and to handle things. So my thought is, and I've spoken to several board members. In fact, about 4 weeks ago, I spoke to board member John Martin about this idea, and he was in favor of it. And I don't mean to put words in Madam Chair's mouth, but I think John had passed that on to Madam Chair, and she seemed to be positive about the possibility of using that money in a very responsible, long-term program. So my thought is, what I'd like to do is I would like to ask this committee for consensus to draft a resolution recommending one of the two following allocation guidelines. The first one would be that we allocate this $103 million, if possible, and we'll have to review the Rescue Fund Act before we know for sure how far we can stretch this out. But if in fact there are possibilities, and in talking to some people about it, they feel there may be, it would be very nice if we could take 10% of that $103 million and allocate that each and every year for the next 10 years in order to balance the budget, take care of payroll increases, and also be responsible to our tax-paying people in Kane County and all our residents, so that we don't have to ask for additional property tax increases. You know, over the last 8 years, there have been no property tax increase for existing property tax payers, and it would be very nice if we could continue that. Can we do it? I don't know. But I do think if we can find a way to reasonably allocate this money, that we can hopefully balance our budget for a number of years, not just 1, 2, or 3 years, maybe as many as 10 years. So I guess what I'm asking of this committee is, first of all, a discussion on my thoughts, and then secondly, a consensus to draft a resolution recommending the following allocation guidelines.
You said you had two.
Yeah, well, the other one is a little bit more controversial, I guess is the best word to use for it, but I think it's something that we should strongly consider. The second option is that we take this $103 million, and instead of using the $103 million ourselves, we take half of that money and return it to existing property tax payers in the county. That would equate to about $51.5 million. I did some projections on that, and with 196,000 parcels that are taxed in the county, it would mean the average parcel would receive $255 back. Doesn't sound like a lot, but I think when we think about it, for many, many people, $255 might handle your groceries for 2 weeks, or handle a car payment, or even help pay your future property taxes. So my thought is, we need to allocate this money over as long a period as we can, and possibly consider giving some type of a rebate or a refund to the existing property tax people, if we want to do that, by splitting the fund from 103,000 to 103 million to 51.5 million. And once again, this would equate to about $255 per property tax parcel.
Very good.
I have a question
please.
about,
Question, please. Bates?
Bates, yes.
Just clarification. What about the other half?
Well, the other half would go to the county, and we would allocate that over as many years as we could, hopefully 10 years, to help balance the budget. Because, Ms. Bates, as you know, with the salary increases that we're going to have this very next year in 2022, that's going to equate to $2 to $3 million. If we have $10 million to allocate over a 10-year period, we would have more than enough to handle that and other emergencies or expenses that may come up. If in fact we only have half of that, that would be about 5 million a year, but we still would have enough to handle the payroll increases and additions that we need right now. And these are needs, not wants, over maybe the next 5 to 10 years. So half of it would go to the property taxpayers, half would stay in the county to be used to help balance our budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Shepro?
Yes, sir. Shep.
Yeah, I confess I didn't follow this as closely perhaps as Mr. Leonard, but I thought there was something in the legislation that limited or precluded local governments from using the money simply for tax relief to their taxpayers.
Mr. Shepro, it's a very good point. And I thought, I bet you Mr. Shepro is going to be listening in on this. So maybe I better do a little research to find out how this is handled. What you're referring to is a state statute. And under the state statute, the state cannot rebate or refund money. However, local government entities such as counties can.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Yes, Chairman.
It says pretty clearly, at least my understanding, that all money has to be expended by 24.
Madam Chair, I saw that too, and I understand that. It's just like last year when they said all the money had to be spent by the end of 2020, and we still have money left over that we're using in the 21 budget. I don't think that's totally defined yet. If it is and they won't change it, then we're going to be limited to a 3-year period. However, I think that flexibility will open up because, under this Relief Act, they're talking about not only expenses, but lost revenue and other things. So I think we might be able to extend it further, but until we get a final reading from them, it's going to be very difficult to say how many years we can extend it over. Ideally, I'd like to extend it over 10 years, but we'll have to wait and find out what the Treasury says.
One question would probably be, what is the definition of spent?
Yes. There could be an allocation without it being spent. So very good point, Mr. Shepro.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment. This is John Martin.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, did I interrupt your thought?
The legalese now, the term spent or allocated, is that a legal term? And if so, we'll have to define it, and that'll be my comment.
Very true.
My comment, if I'm next on the board here, is one of the reasons that I am supportive of extending this as long as we can is that if you think just simply to the multi-purpose building that we're going to soon open up, that project in and of itself took 2 years to plan, and then it had to be constructed. And I'd like to think of a more noble term, but I fear how in heaven's name we're going to spend wisely $103 million in 3 years. It's beyond me to anticipate that we could put decent plans in effect. And I'm going to assume that the expenditure is going to involve things that take consideration, and using again the multi-purpose building as an example. So it's a less noble purpose, but I'd like to extend this as far as we can, just simply to assist us in making the decisions as wisely as we can. Dumping this much money into a project and having it done by 2003, I think is fraught with potential issues. And looking back at it, saying, I wish we'd have had more time.
Mr. Chairman, Shepro again, please.
Yes, sir.
To comment on both of those, I think we learned from the CARES Act that the Treasury Department must have changed its rulings or clarified its rulings so many times that I lost count. And you may recall at the beginning, we supposedly were told that we couldn't use it for payroll unless we could directly relate it to COVID. And then along the way, it became that certain expenditures were deemed to be directly related without having to prove it. So I do think, to the points that have been made, while, you'd never know what they're going to do, given the speed with which this was done and the fact that so much is going to depend on legalese, like what is the meaning of the word spent? Think of all the trouble we went through with our municipal partners. Did we have to spend the money? Did we have to have a contract? What did all that mean? And the Treasury Department kind of kept changing its mind or issuing new clarifications. So I think that it makes eminent sense to at least initially, go along with what Mr. Martin and Mr. Leonard have suggested. That doesn't mean that we have to do that, but it sets a policy that gives you, I think, maximum flexibility when we start getting amendments, changes, extensions, et cetera.
Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate Bill's ideas and work on this. And I would be in favor of seeing a resolution move forward on this if it were only as to recommend and not as to set the policy officially. I do think that there is a lot of conversation to be had about this, especially once we get clear guidance from the Treasury Department. And it'll be important to run it through the committee process so that we can have very long, drawn-out conversations, as some of you may remember from the last year of CARES Act committee meetings. We'll try and keep them shorter. But yeah, I do think there's a lot of conversation to have. So as long as this would only be as a recommendation kind of proposal, I would be in favor of seeing it move forward.
All right, Mr. Leonard.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. I agree with your points, and I think it is something we're so early into it. We can't make mandates. We can make suggestions or recommendations, and that's really what I'm proposing here. It was very interesting. Mr. Martin and Mr. Shepro both mentioned the reasonableness of extending this money over a number of years. And I'd just like to point out with respect to a couple of resolutions that we have on the agenda today, authorizing the establishment of the State's Attorney's Office for an Abuse and Neglect and Domestic Violence Unit program, and then also a Child Advocacy Center and a Domestic Violence Unit. These are expenses that are going to go on forever. This isn't going to be a year or two or three. It's going to go on for hopefully not ever, but for many, many years. So to be able to allocate this money over an extended period of time will help balance our budget and take care of the needs of our people, especially those most in need. And I think the state's attorney and the public defender expressed those very well at the Judicial and Public Safety meeting. So my thought is we'll have to review everything. We can't make mandates, Mr. Sanchez, as you recommended, but I think we can make suggestions and recommendations for consideration so that we can spend this money over a period of time, because these expenses aren't going to go away in a year or two or three, just as the revenue is a one-time thing. So the longer we can extend it, I think the better off we are.
Mr. Tepe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not sure where I should start, but so I might be a little bit disorganized. I think it's premature to have a discussion associated with creating resolutions. We haven't received, among other things, the final advice from the federal government as to what the administration of these funds should be. So coming up with any kind of a resolution, I think would be premature. Second, I think we need to really be concerned about the people in this county that have been affected by COVID. A tremendous number of people have not been overly affected. I personally am one that has not been, particularly financially. So as a consequence, my wife and I have decided to take the funds that we're getting due to the American Recovery Act and increase our spending associated with those social organizations that we feel would be appropriate for that. We have a little bit over $15 million that we will be administering with the help of the state to help people with rent relief. I think the people that have been affected by rent relief, this will just be scratching the surface. I think we're going to need 2 or 3 or 4 times that amount of money if we really want to make a difference. So to go and give a rebate back to every taxpayer, I think would be against the spirit of what I think this money is used for. We need to help the people that were affected by COVID. And that means the businesses that are, some of them are starting to bounce back, but some of them are having struggles. And the people that are having trouble with rent relief, those people that have lost their jobs, we need to take care of the people in this county, not worry about using funds like this to take care of our budget needs. So I'll be on the other side of this argument and this discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tepe, I can't argue one point you brought up. I understand your position and I get it. My concern is, quite honestly, the well-being of our county financially long-term. Last year we received a tremendous amount of money. We had to spend most of it. We have some left in reserve, but that will be gone in short order. My concern is with the needs of this county, and one of the needs, as you mentioned, Mr. Tepe, which I think is very valid, we have to take care of the people who need the help the most. That's why I feel the children that are victims of domestic violence, neglect, and the Child Advocacy Center are so important that we do that to help these people. And because of COVID, these numbers have increased drastically. So I just think it's the type of thing that if we don't take care of our budget over the next number of years, we're going to have a problem 2-3 years down the road where all of a sudden we don't have enough revenue coming in to handle the employees and the needs of our residents. And then we're going to be in a situation where ultimately we're going to have to make some very hard decisions. And that could mean letting people go or laying them off. And I don't want to be any part of that. So I'm just trying to look at the long term and see how we can best help our people. And by reducing staff or programs, I don't think is in the best interest of the residents.
I have a comment.
Yes, Chairman.
Actually, I have 2, if I may. I'm following your logic, and of course, we all support the needs of our community on both ends. Both Mr. Tepe and yourself, Mr. Leonard, have spoken well about this. But once again, I'm going to be relying on just being fiscally conservative, is that 10 years is still a finite amount of money. It's a finite time. And after the 10 years are over with, where is that revenue going to be coming from to pay for these additional expenses that on both ends are badly needed? So to me, this is once again using money for short-term needs rather than how we're going to plan it out after those 10 years are over with. And if we can present a budget that would show that going forward, I think we'd be much more comfortable potentially using that money over a 10-year period. The other question I have, and that's just my thought on that, and I'm sure we can work that out appropriately. I'm just curious, this is $50 million. It's a lot of money. How is it invested? I mean, how, literally, what bank or banks are going to be getting this money?
Treasurer will take care.
So we have Mrs. Brady here, so maybe she can respond to that.
And this is for the long term, this is how long we're going to use it.
Speak into the mic, please.
Our cash flow. Again, a lot of issues come into this. How long are we going to keep the money? What is our cash flow? Are we going to spread it out for the 10 years, like Mr. Leonard said? And all those issues combined will affect how it will be invested.
Is it going to several institutions, financial institutions? It's going to a single financial institution?
That hasn't been determined yet. Yeah. A lot of banks right now are very liquid. They don't want our money. They have, because of all this relief programs, they have too much cash. They don't want money. So that's another issue.
I have a checking account.
All right.
But that's
Mr.
issues that we
Chairman?
can discuss with the new
Yes, Ms.
treasurer
Bates.
and work it
Thank
out.
you. I wish I had read the entire American Rescue Plan like this morning so that I could be more of an expert on the legal aspirations of it. I believe the purpose of the bill is to help the economy recover as quickly as possible and to create jobs. So to give $250 to each of our tax payers, I don't think is in the spirit of the bill. And I would hope that we would keep job creation more in mind for the county, and to go on with what Mr. Tepe said, to worry about those people who have been most affected, especially those who lost their jobs. Let's think of some projects we can do to stimulate the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. The comment, Mr. Leonard, you were looking for a resolution of some.
You know, I would like to withdraw that request at this point. I think the points brought up today were very good with respect to how can we define anything now or even give any direction today or even maybe in the next month or 2 months. But I did want to get the discussion started where we look at what we can do most responsibly for the residents of Kane County and the employees of Kane County and balancing our budget. So I'm very happy with the discussion today. I hope that we can continue this. And if we get to a point where we feel a resolution is necessary, I would be very happy to be involved with that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, do you have any suggestion? What is the best way to approach it then?
Well, I think what we need to do is open this up for discussion again. Obviously, at our next finance meeting, executive committee may want to consider it too, which I think would be very worthwhile. And then I think maybe at the next committee of the whole, we should have a discussion and or presentation about what we're receiving, how we're receiving it, and at this point, how that can be spent or allocated, as Mr. Shepro said. I think if we handle those different stages, we'll do it responsibly and we'll come up with a good solution that everyone will be aware of and agree with.
I think, one of the thoughts in my mind was that each commissioner could come up with some written feelings of what we can do with the money. We'd have something that we can evaluate from that standpoint.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great idea. And if we could get some kind of a written response from each and every county board member, I think it would be good. I've always found a lot of times when I put things down on paper, it kind of clears my mind and gets me focused on what we need to look at. So I think that's a great suggestion, Mr. Chairman. And if you would like to do that, I'd be more than happy to support that.
All right. Well,
Mr. Chairman, Shepro?
Shepro?
I agree with that, but at the same time, I think the comments that were made a couple minutes ago, I think we still need to have some general understanding of what we think it all means, even if not all of the regulations and explanations have been made, which I think then could focus our fellow commissioners in coming up with things that actually would work within the guidelines or the rules as we now know them. But as we've learned, it's one thing to pass a statute and it's another thing for the Treasury Department to start writing regulations and rules. But I agree. I think that, we have other mechanisms besides just a resolution. We have financial policies that we adopt, which are often not specific, but broad policy statements as to what our goals and objectives are. And I think without trying to micromanage it right now, I think that's the kind of discussion that I think Mr. Leonard envisioned, and which I think has already begun taking place today in a very productive way.
Well, I think it certainly would be a good discussion for a committee of the whole.
Yeah.
So, but that could be a long meeting.
Well, we have a lot of things that are going to be coming up for committee of the whole, I suspect. So,
Well, that's why I like the idea of putting it in on paper for each member, putting their thoughts down. And I think it's easier to evaluate that way, but we obviously need to do both, so.
bear in mind that those would all be subject to FOIA, of course.
I know, yeah, that's, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Bates,
Yes.
please. If we want to express our opinions, to whom would we send our opinions?
Well, to chairman of this committee would be fine.
Thank you.
With a copy to the newspapers.
All of them.
Oh, God.
If I may, as I'll be working with Mr. Onsick, and as we get guidance, we can send that out through Jane to all of you, so that as we'll receive it, we make sure that we're all reading the same information. And if you have anything unique that we're not sending you, if you could please send it to Jane, and then we can send it out to all board members. So we're all reading the same information and hopefully be on the same page, so we can have the same discussion based on facts.
Good point.
Very good. Any other discussion at this point in time on?
I'd like to make one comment if I could.
Mark?
John Martin. You know, I'm thinking back to the CARES Act, and we, within a range, we had a fairly mechanical method of handling that. We used formulas that had been provided relative to our municipal contribution. We had clear out-of-pocket expenses for the county, which became more unclear as time went on. And we had, you know, a whole lot less money to deal with. And it was a gargantuan task. And this isn't perhaps accomplishing anything, but as we looked at what we're going to do with this much more money, our default may be to come up with something that's simple enough that we can actually figure out how to administer it. And I'm not advocating against any programs, but the more complexity we add to this, the more difficult it's going to become to do a good job of addressing these issues. And maybe I judge the world by my lack of ability to sort through this, but I can't imagine that, to me, keeping it simple and trying to spread this out takes us back to the point of maybe it's going to be something we can manage when we start talking about separate programs. And then I know we're a board of 24 people, so we should have 24 opinions.
Oh, yes.
Having said that,
At least.
24 opinions, if all 24 opinions become part of the conversation, we'll be at the end of 24 and we won't even have a consensus of what we want to do. So I just think we're going to have to be a little, as we analyze this and move forward, we're going to have to be a little, we have to paint with a brush that's a whole heck of a lot broader than I think we're looking at today. But that's my comment.
Mr. Berman Surges here.
Mr. Surges?
Just, and I don't want to speak for Jared or former Commissioner Chairman Hoscheit, but being on the CARES Act committee, politely, you spend so much time and you get so emotionally invested in this, and truly you have so many conversations, only for the rules to change in the 11th hour and it goes into a different direction. And if I could just put out there for everybody, be patient. They're not our rules. Everybody has the best intentions. And I believe we're all doing what we, in our hearts, we believe to be true. But as those as those changes occur and as each iteration evolves, we need to be flexible and agile enough to go with it and stay focused on what we believe to be right.
I think it's just another opportunity and challenge, so we'll move on. Item 7, Auditor Wegman.
Good morning. Our report is on file, and I just wanted to reiterate, according to the report, that we're really proud to be having the opportunity to host an intern this upcoming summer, and hopefully this program will be something that we can continue every semester going forward. So we're really excited about that.
Any questions of Auditor? Yes, Sanchez?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to thank Auditor Wegman for being innovative. You've come up with a couple of different ideas and things now in your short time in office, so appreciate the work you're putting in.
Thank you. Any other comments? Moving on, new business. Resolution A. Joe, you want to?
Oh, yes. This is a simple resolution. It refers back to what I mentioned in my report, how we needed to change the amount that was allocated to the Property Tax Freeze Protection Fund and reduce it by $215,000 as a result of some additional expenditures that were posted and as a result of less revenue that had been received than had been anticipated. So the actual allocation has been adjusted, so now we're just needing to also change the budget adjustment or the budget to go along with it. And then we need to add about $26,000 more to the building management budget in order to cover those additional expenditures that we found. So this is just simply cleaning up the year and making sure our budget matches what was actually occurring.
All right, we need a motion to approve.
Move acceptance.
Tepe?
Leonard seconds.
Leonard seconds. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford, Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item B?
This is, sorry.
Yes. Continue.
Okay. This is to create the Max Vaccination Fund, Fund 354. So our financial policies require board approval to create a new fund. So this is the fund I explained in my report that we're needing to, this is where the revenues will be coming in to pay for this, as well as the expenditures will be charged. Now, one of the things that I'm wanting to do as part of this resolution is first of all, to provide initial funding into it by transferring $500,000 from the COVID savings into this fund, just so that we could start out with sufficient cash on hand, because we don't know yet how much this is going to cost and if we have multiple sites. So at least we have something on hand. And then to the extent that we're reimbursed through other funding sources, and what we have left at the end when this program is closed would then go back to the special reserve. So this is really just to provide initial funding, that $500,000. Secondly, I wanted to also, in the event that there is not sufficient cash on hand because of some large expenses that are coming through, I wanted to provide a line of credit so that we don't run into trouble in that respect either. And again, that line of credit would come from the general fund, but it would be repaid as soon as the reimbursement comes in. So it's just really to manage the cash flow. So those are the things that would be accomplished by this resolution.
Do we have a motion?
Sanchez moves.
Leonard seconds.
All right. You have that. Discussion?
Surges. Joe, the line of credit is just an internal bookkeeping thing, correct?
Yes, and it would allow the treasurer to pay the bill, because if we did not have that and there was not sufficient cash on hand in the fund, the treasurer, according to our policies, would not be allowed to pay that bill.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item C,
This is a, let's see, I hope I'm in the right order. Oh, okay, this is a budget, I'm sorry, it's not one of mine, that's why I was caught here. This is the budget for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program that was prepared by the Office of Community Reinvestment.
Leonard moves.
Leonard moves,
Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Item D,
This is a resolution that authorizes a budget adjustment. This is really just a technical housekeeping item. We're improving the way that we're accounting for the funds that are in the public safety sales tax fund. Right now, we have expenditures by both the sheriff and by the information technology department out of the same fund. And it's starting to become confusing by having them use the same account numbers. So this is going to separate that out on the accounting side so that they each have their own sub-department. And as a result of that, we just need to move the budget from that pertains to the sheriff into his own sub-department. So that's what this is accomplishing.
So moved, Surges.
Leonard seconds.
have a motion, a second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item E, resolution.
Item E
Yes.
is the sheriff is transferring some of his budget to help fund the position of a pre-arrest division manager in the state's attorney's office.
Leonard moves.
Sanchez
Martin,
seconds.
seconds.
All right. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item F.
Item F is definitely one of mine. I'm presenting this resolution to you to ask for funding for a new accountant/budget analysis position within the finance department. As those of you who are familiar with things here, and for those of you who aren't, it has been very difficult to keep up with things. We're working a tremendous amount of hours, and it's besides not being able to keep up the amount of hours we're putting in, we're just not able to keep up with the work. And so having this additional position at this level would help us tremendously. I've struggled to figure out where to find funding for this. Fortunately, as part of my report, I came across the situation where we're actually going to be collecting about $35,000 more of property tax revenue than what we had budgeted, and that's a permanent increase in revenue going forward. So that would help fund it. The total cost for the remainder of this year is $75,000, so that would leave $40,000 yet unfunded, for which I'm suggesting that we use contingency for that. And obviously going forward, we need a permanent source of funding, but that's what I'm proposing for this year.
Leonard moves.
Surges, second.
All right, discussion?
Joe, this is Cliff. You know what? I look at this and I sometimes wonder how in the world you even do what you do and keep up with everything that we throw at you. And I don't know if in my mind, this is something that's of a permanent nature, but over the next 3 years, if all of a sudden we have this influx of money coming that we're asking you to be the quarterback of, then we should at least give you the tools and the personnel needed to help us keep track of that money.
Well, thank you. I do think that we'll also need probably additional help, like for example, from KEB like to continue forward, or a firm like them to help administer, just like they assisted with CARES Act. So what I'm proposing here, it's really to keep up with the permanent workload that we have. It's not just the transient workload of CARES Act administration. I mean, that certainly has pushed it over the top, and we'll always, work extra hours to accommodate the extra things. It's just the day-to-day has just got to be more than we can handle also.
Any
And
further
if
discussion?
75,000 is the appropriate amount for the balance, what is the full annual cost? Is it the 121?
I believe so.
Okay, that's fine. I see. I'm just confirming.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item G.
Item G is just a simple what we call a rollover of budget dollars. So these were dollars that had been budgeted to be spent in 2020, but for whatever reason was not spent. So those funds still remain available. We're just moving them over into fiscal year 21, and that's for these fiber optic project funds that IT department is responsible for.
Leonard, so moves.
Martin, seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item H, another rollover.
Yes, it is. It's for computer capital.
Moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Surges moves.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Passes. Thank you.
And item I, another rollover.
It's the same. It's instead it's for software capital.
Leonard moves.
Surges second.
There's just a second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item J, State's Attorney Office Mental Health Unit position.
Leonard moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item K, establishing the State's Attorney Office Abuse and Neglect and Domestic Violence position.
Surges moves.
Leonard, seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item L, budget adjustment for the State's Attorney's Office Child Advocacy Center and
Just moves.
Domestic Violence.
Surges moves.
Leonard, seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item M, authorize the Judicial Center Boiler Replacement Unit.
Tepe moves.
Do we have a second?
Leonard, seconds.
Leonard. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Bates?
Bates, please. Did we review this for energy efficiency, green stuff like that?
To answer your question, this is Chris Allen. To answer your question, yes, we did, and the larger scope of the project is also following the green building policy.
Thanks, Chris.
You're
Thank
welcome,
you.
ma'am.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item N, new funds.
Okay, this is a resolution that creates the remaining funds that are necessary for the Long Meadow Parkway toll bridge. We have the first fund, Fund 306. This is the fund where we need to deposit RTA sales tax revenue as required by our bond covenant in an amount that would pay for the debt service for the particular year. And this will be used as a backup in the event that there is not sufficient toll revenue collected. And then at the end of the year, whatever remains is returned to the county. So that's the first fund. The second fund is Fund 307. That's simply the fund that the operating expenses of the toll bridge would be recorded in, and also the fund in which the toll revenue would be deposited. Then Fund 308 is what we're calling the Toll Bridge Renewal Fund. This is the fund that some people have called an endowment fund, some people have called a perpetual maintenance fund or replacement fund. This is where any excess toll revenue will be deposited in order to build up a sufficient balance to be able to continue to maintain the toll bridge once the tolls are ended.
Leonard moves.
Deputy seconds.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Chris Caius. I really only want to discuss this as long as it takes to take off the toll. So it shouldn't take long. It's taking a long time to get on there. The way I read this, it sounds like a perpetual, especially fund number 3 is, I just want to remind the board that this sounds like a perpetual toll that's going to last forever. It's a burden on the residents in the northern part of the county. It's it's a toll that is we're subjected to, but no other portion of the county is subjected to. And although I understand this is just a funding thing right now, I would like the board to keep in mind that I'm asking their assistance in retiring this portion of the toll and the fund as soon as possible, so that we are not subjected to having to pay more than the rest of the county for our road to get across our village. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion?
Surges.
Sturgis.
Hey, Chris, is there a sunset clause in here or that can be inserted?
I'm glad you're asked. You see, I don't see one. I think that would be a great idea. There's probably a reason I'm not on the finance committee, because I'm not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed.
We're
when it
talking
comes to
here
finance,
about creating three funds, which is sort of a technical thing rather than.
You're asking why are there 3 funds or?
No, I said, that's what you're looking at, is setting up accounting for the
Yes.
3 funds, and that's all it is.
Yes, and then maybe, the wording, when I wrote this, I may, I'm not sure where the idea that this is a perpetual thing coming from, but I see that maybe I used the wrong phrase when I said in the third, now therefore be it resolved clause, the last clause, it says that excess revenue, net operating maintenance and debt service expenditures transferred from the toll bridge fund and into which shall accumulate an amount sufficient to fund future renewal, replacement, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and improvement of any part of the toll bridge. I really should say bridge, because it wasn't intended that this is going to perpetuate as a toll bridge. So we could remove that word toll and just leave it as, or Long Meadow Bridge, something to that effect.
Mr. Chairman, comment, Shepro?
Yes, Shepard.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Onzik's suggestion is good. I would note that it's very likely that the underlying fund, I think as was pointed out, is required by our bond covenants.
Yes.
So while it wouldn't be perpetual, any sunset, I think, should be coordinated with our bond counsel, but probably would say something like that this fund would, to the extent that it's dedicated because of the bond requirements coverage, obviously whether it continues after that fact, it wouldn't be collected from tolls presumably at that point, but I would say that to redress Mr. Caius's and Mr. Surgis's questions and my questions, perhaps we should ask bond counsel to just pass on this before it goes to the full board.
All right. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I
Yes,
think
Mark.
all of these resolutions are that relate to the mechanics of collecting the toll and what have you, are all subordinate to the bonds and to the projects themselves, and they're all gonna have a lifespan that is contingent upon the project. And I'm very apprehensive about amending documents that, as Mr. Shepro commented, may have a bearing upon commitments that we've made to underwriters and what have you at a meeting like this. As I said in the beginning, they're all subordinate to the project itself, and if the toll ends, the toll ends.
Agreed. Any other comments, discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
No.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Passes.
All right, item O.
Okay, this is a resolution to create a fund for the American Rescue Plan dollars that we're anticipating. So at least we're ahead of the game this time, so the fund will be there for when the dollars come in. And then it's just a simple budget. It's putting it all in contingency. And then from there, we can allocate it out once decisions are made by the board.
Leonard moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item P.
Item T. Okay,
P is in Paul.
P is in
I'm sorry. Okay,
1,700 to
All right.
7,750.
I was, okay, thank you.
Gatsby ones.
Okay. Okay, creation of funds 7,700 through 7,715. These are 16 new funds that need to be created for KDOT accounting purposes. Right now, they're accounting for 16 different townships within one fund. And because of this GASB 84 new standard, we need to separate them out into 16 separate funds, and that's what this is accomplishing.
Leonard moves.
Steffi second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item Q.
Okay, this is a resolution. It's just to clear up some outstanding, I guess, paperwork, you would say. We have a credit card program with Fifth Third Bank that we've had for years and years. And now that we've had some issues and we're trying to sort things out, and our representative is retiring, they found out that they don't have anything on file that authorizes someone in the county to actually administer the program. So what this would do is it would authorize Madam Chair as being the certifying person, and then in turn, then she would be able to authorize me as being an administrator of the fund so that we could provide the proper paperwork to Fifth Third Bank that we are authorized to do so.
Surges moves.
Steffi
Happy
second.
second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item R.
This is a resolution that was actually prepared by our purchasing director. It's a project that has been on the back burner for actually a few years now. And this is where the county has been requiring just 2 coverage levels of insurance that our vendors need to provide proof of. Those are those certificates of insurance that we normally require for when they're, when we contract with them. And the coverage amounts have been either $1 million or $5 million, which are very high for some very small contracts that we enter into. And so this proposal is to make more of a graduated scale that's based on the risk level of whatever the services are that will be provided. So our purchasing director has come up with this. We're working with Presidio, our insurance broker, on this. It has not yet been approved by our insurance broker. I thought it would be by today, but it's not. So if it's not approved by our insurance broker, by executive committee, we can pull this and table it until next month because it really needs to be approved by him as well.
Very good.
Okay.
Leonard moves.
Surges seconds.
This is to table it, right?
No, we don't need
No,
to table.
no,
it.
we're
We can
moving.
approve it.
We're just
Then
removing
if
it.
the insurance specialist doesn't give us the exact figures, we can then table it at executive.
Yeah, so it'll be contingent upon his
We can just
approval.
remove it, that's it. We don't need any resolution, right? Item S.
Wait, we're calling a
We need
vote
to-
on that.
Yeah, we need to vote on that.
We do need a motion to remove it?
We had a motion and a
And a
second
second.
Yeah.
Is it to remove it?
to approve it.
To approve it
Move it on
subject
to
to.
executive, and then if the insurance specialist doesn't give us defined answers to the amendment or to the resolution, then it will be dropped from the agenda
Okay, thank
for
you.
executive.
Thank you.
Well, I don't, that's not the way, is that what, I thought we were just going to remove the item from the,
I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding. I had meant, I mean, what a suggestion from myself would be to approve it with
All right.
contingent upon that it be approved also by our insurance broker by the executive committee meeting.
okay, we have a motion and a second, any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Tepe here. This is for liability insurance,
Yes,
correct?
it is.
And liability insurance is relatively low cost, won't say inexpensive, but I'm surprised that we would go down to a recommended liability insurance coverage of 25,000. That the 25,000 and the 75,000 is just extremely low. And I just think it's way out of proportion.
As I said, we're still waiting to hear the response from our insurance broker, so I'm sure if he agrees with that, that would certainly be changed.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Tappy, Surges here.
Mr. Leonard first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tepe, I wanted to point out, I don't think the insurance broker will approve those low limits. Those were just put in there for consideration. So if in fact they are approved at those lower limits and we don't like it, we can always vote it down in executive.
Yes.
But it wouldn't be presented to us.
Pardon me?
How would it be represented to us? We have already approved it. Would it come back for reconsideration?
Well, I think Mr. Anzick would probably give us information, what was approved, what wasn't approved by the insurance broker. And then we would make our decision on that resolution based on your findings.
Which is why tabling this would be the appropriate
Then
action.
we're going to take another month.
Yeah, if you're comfortable more tabling it now, that's fine. I don't mean to push you or, that there was some urgency, I think, because there are some contracts that are under consideration right now. That's, I guess, the lower bid person or was not able to make these coverages because they were so high, because we're talking about the $1 million coverage. So they didn't think that was appropriate and they were hoping to get this approved in time for those
We have a
contracts.
motion and a second to approve. Is there any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Tepe.
No.
And item T.
S.
S?
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
I'm
Chair.
sorry, yes.
Yes, building management is very excited for this to go through the process, hopefully today on to executive within the committee. With this contract, this will be a key element for building management to provide the board with a grand scale assessment of the current facilities as well as the grounds, so we can make future quantifiable decisions going forward on our properties. It's the master plan is what I'm referring to.
Do we have a motion?
Leonard moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Pepe.
Yes.
Yeses, thank you.
Now, item T, to purchase 10 replacement vehicles.
Leonard moves.
Martin seconds.
Happy? Okay. Discussion? Roll call.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Pepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item U, street sweeping from Mill Creek.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is for the services out at the Mill Creek Special Service Area. As you know, the residents at Mill Creek pay an extra levy for these types of services, and hopefully it'll be approved.
Martin moves.
Leonard seconds.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Pepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item V. Chris?
Yes, sir. In reference to this resolution, it's been fluid and changing by the minute as of this morning. So I would recommend that this be pulled. The numbers on this resolution would not be pure today. However, we are currently out of contract with HVAC maintenance as of the 26th.
All right, we'll remove it.
Leonard moves to table.
Sanchez seconds.
Table till
Table till next month?
next month.
Next month, is that okay, Chris?
If it pleases the committee and the board.
All right. Discussion?
No discussion on table.
No discussion. No discussion. Roll call.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Pepe.
Yes.
Was
Thank you.
tabled. Item W.
Sanchez moves.
Leonard seconds.
Discussion? Surges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say this is coming from the Agriculture Committee. This is a really good program. A lot of people on the board might not even be aware we're doing these mini grants to farmers, but it's going a long way to really help organic and small specialty crop farmers in Kane County. I think that's something that we could become known for over the next decade, is really supporting these kinds of efforts. I would love to see more money thrown this way, but this is a really good thing that we're doing. So just wanted to give a comment on that.
Very good. Any other discussion? Yes,
Just-
Chairman.
Just to add on to that grant program, it would be very nice. I've spoken to one of the organic farmers, and they would like to have a promotion of a tour to organic farms, however we may call that. So it would be lovely if we could get a listing of where those farmers are, just so that we're aware if they happen to be supplying produce or meat or whatever, that eggs, that if they have a store, that the community is aware of where they are to support them.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Pepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item X. It's, it's Mr. Rickard.
Yes. He's not here.
Yeah, real quickly,
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just mention that this is for hiring an additional highway planner. Highway maintainer. Where we are replacing an existing vacancy. And these positions are critical to ensuring the safety of the motoring public and the efficient movement of traffic.
All right. Leonard moves.
Leonard moves.
Discussion?
Did we get a second on that?
Martin seconds.
Pepe.
Whoever.
Discussion?
Just one point. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out that, as Mr. Rickert mentioned, this is replacement. There's no additional charge to the general fund or any other expense. This is in their budget, so I support it.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes?
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item Y, personnel replacement hiring in the health department.
Sanchez moves.
Leonard seconds.
Leonard second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard, yes?
Martin,
Martin,
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And item Z, approval of claims paid.
Leonard moves.
Martin
Martin
seconds.
second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes?
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have no old business. Is there any old business? A motion to place reports on file?
So moved.
Sanchez seconds.
Discussion? Oh, no discussion. Roll call, please.
Leonard, yes?
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe.
Yes.
Thank you.
No need for executive session?
Move for adjournment.
Move for German second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Aye.